Truth Cypher, Chapter 3. Consciousness cannot be created or destroyed. Proponents of transhumanism seem to believe they, or we, will one day be able to simulate or even create consciousness. According to the originator of the computer reality simulation theory, Nicholas Bostrom, there are only three possibilities for humanity. 1. We are literally living in a computer simulation. 2. There is a strong aversion in advanced civilizations to making ancestor simulations. That is, highly evolved civilizations have no interest in making what are essentially video games of their past. 3. Something destroys all civilizations before they're able to advance to the point where they are technologically capable of simulating consciousness. And that was from a Vice article, which the link is in the comments. I'm struck by the blind spot regarding consciousness. It almost seems casual to Bolstrom, a given that we will one day be able to simulate consciousness. Like Musk, he's simultaneously wrong and onto something he doesn't appear to be aware of. 1. Yes, we are living in a kind of simulation, although not a computer one. 2. Is completely uninteresting and irrelevant and need not be discussed. 3. Yes, something may indeed destroy all civilizations, as described in Chapter 2. Yet simulating consciousness has nothing to do with stopping it. In the Matrix movies, human mind was enslaved, but consciousness was not created. It might appear that some of the characters who were not human in the Matrix had consciousness. Despite appearances, true consciousness cannot be programmed. No matter how smart AI becomes, it can never be conscious. It would ultimately be psychopathic. Even if programmed to be kind, it would simply be psychopathically empathic. All right, so that's the end of Chapter 3. So I guess I should try to unpack that a little bit. So I didn't really, let's see. I guess we could just go through the numbers. So Nicholas Bolstrom, he's talking about the three possibilities for humanity. I'm not quite sure how they came up with just these three possibilities. It's kind of funny that Musk and Bolstrom are out there saying this is the only possibilities for humanity, and they're all three of them are pretty far out. But so we're literally living in a computer simulation. So we talked about that, in Chapter 1, with Elon Musk, and I was saying the metaphor is correct. The computer software virtual reality metaphor is correct. However, what this actually is, this existence, it's not a computer simulation. And I'll go into that I'll go into that right now. It's not a simulation because, as the title suggests, consciousness cannot be created or destroyed. In order for even the Matrix movie to exist, technology would have to have progressed to the point where we can create consciousness and completely simulate it. I think the mystery of life is such that it just cannot be done. Like your subjective internal experience of your mind, it just can't be created by a computer. This is true humanity, and this is something that can't be bottled in such a way. I absolutely think it should be studied, but they don't really understand when you get right down to it, they don't understand what makes life. Like they can study the effects of life, which is what science is all about. I'm kind of slowly working my way through a book called what is it called? The Healing. I think it's called The Healing Cure, by somebody, Dr. Birch. Oh man, I gotta find that. I gotta find the name of that book. Just give me a second. He says, like, and I always, for some reason my mind will always keep track of the asides. Like, I'll of course retain the bigger picture, but I kind of like the anecdotes that people come up with. So one of those is, if you ask a biologist, okay, wait. So the book is Hands-On Healing, a training course by William Bankston. And that book is basically, it's a technique to heal. And we're talking about healing things like cancer, like we're talking about serious healing. I've only made my way halfway through it. But what's interesting about this book is that he studies healing. Like he found a technique because he was friends with somebody who could just heal people and who could do all sorts of paranormal things. And he's a doctor, he's a scientist, not a medical doctor. He's a a PhD in sociology, but nevertheless he's an academic, and he was fascinated by his friend's ability to heal, and he wanted to study it. He got university funds and access to study healing. And for him, the healing is not even what's interesting. It's why does the healing work? So anyway, the anecdote I wanted to get into is, if you ask about, like, if you scratch your hand, a bunch of cells come off, and then your hand will heal itself eventually. It'll put itself back to the way it was. But if you ask a biology, why do the cells heal only up to the point where they need to heal? They can't actually give you an answer. They don't know. Basically his point is, there's so much mystery in life and in science. It's astounding. So he's got all this documented healing data, and he can't really get any serious, quote unquote serious, institution to actually look at it, despite the fact that he's healing people from cancer, and he's having results. He's studying this in a lab. They'll take rats and they will do this hands-on healing technique, and they will heal the rats, but they haven't isolated why the rats get healed. Like, he's close. Like, using the scientific method, he can sort of isolate what doesn't work. But what's interesting is that his results are not always replicable. Like, and I believe he's tapping into some extra consciousness field. And this is something that does not really conform to the materialist scientific method. Like, you can replicate results, but it's not the subjectivity of consciousness is part of consciousness. Like, it's not like material where you get reliable results all the time. Although he does get he gets sort of reliable results. Like, but he just can't. It's the why that he cannot isolate. Although he's close, so his main interest is in researching the why. For him, he's healed hundreds, probably thousands, with the technique, and he's just not interested in that. For him, as a scientist, as a doctor, it's not really what he's interested in. You don't have to, while you talk, if you were to talk to most people about hands-on healing, they won't even get to the premise of, like, yeah, you can heal people with this healing technique. Like, that, you're going to lose most people at that. This guy's way beyond that. He's like, healing is no big deal. What is the mystery is why. And I think that's fascinating. I really should finish this book because I haven't really even tested this method. I got stuck on the technique is actually, I found it to be not that simple. Maybe I'll talk about it on some other podcast if I finish the book. It's a mental exercise that seems like the simplest thing in the world, and it's sometimes the simplest thing in the world is simultaneously the most difficult. So to return to Truth Cypher, so my point was in Bolstrom's number one possibility, we're living in a computer simulation. I think consciousness debunks that. Intuitively, I know it does. This goes back to intuition and synthesis. I can't prove. Maybe I can't prove it, but sometimes, when you read like a philosophical book or a great book, things just speak to you intuitively, and you know them to be true or you know them to be important. So I'm going to have to go with, we're not living in a computer simulation, because my subjective understanding of my own consciousness does not tell me that. Number 2, there's a strong aversion in advanced civilizations to making ancestor simulations. That is, highly evolved civilizations have no interest in making what are essentially video games of their past. I decided to skip this in the book. Maybe we can talk about it for a few minutes here. It just seems it seemed a little silly to me that would be number 2, because it seems a little obscure. Like, I don't know, we have billions of interests, in our current reality right now. So why in the future would we be so transhuman that we wouldn't have time for trivialities such as, let's see what it was like in the past, if they could construct consciousness technologically. I mean, I don't know, that just it's stunning to me that that's number 2, because it just seems completely dumb. And then number 3, something destroys all civilizations before they're able to advance to the point where they are technologically capable of simulating consciousness. So, back to the metaphor and cataclysm, or is it catastrophism? Whatever Randall Carlson would call the study of catastrophe in history, and what could be breaking the cycle, or what could be built into the cycle of our planetary history. That metaphor totally works. Like, we could be, like, if you go with the Graham Hancock theory of, like, okay, there was an advanced civilization prior to a deluge, and only the survivors were able to seed, ancient tribes that we know of, like the Egyptians and the Mayans and whatnot. But prior to them, there was a high civilization. But the deluge set it back to zero. I think it's totally, I think that metaphor works. So, it's funny that Bolstrom comes to that conclusion. And I think I go on to talk about, in the Matrix, regarding creating consciousness, like, the Matrix in the, I guess, what do you call it? The truth seeker, or the truther community, the wake up community. I don't know. I don't even know. I thought I knew that. I thought I knew it was a thing, but I don't know the terminology anymore, because this is not a unified movement, if it's a movement at all. I think it's actually just an individual thing of some indescribable aspect of consciousness. And maybe there's some connection, but there's so many different roads to take. Tangent. In the Matrix is a touchstone movie, because the metaphor is just the metaphor, to describe what we're in right now. It's just perfect. But the Matrix will, in the movie, they're suggesting that they can control your dreams, and the AI has such control over consciousness that they can create reality in that way. That's the fictional movie part of it, and that's why it's a metaphor. Bolstrom and Musk are saying we live in the Matrix. They're just outright saying it. There's really the data, the information that that science understands consciousness to that degree, where they could construct a mental world, is it's just not there, as far as I can tell. And also, when I was talking, I wanted to talk about the characters in the Matrix, because a lot of those characters are AI. Even the good ones in the Matrix would be part of the computer simulation. And I think that's problematic if you look at I'm not saying we couldn't create AI. Artificial intelligence is not consciousness, so you could create benevolent AI, absolutely. I don't know about absolutely, but I don't see why it's not possible. But it can never feel, and I think the way I understand psychopathy is there's the absence of conscience and feeling. So even if you've programmed goodness into an AI, it's a psychopathic empathy. Like it's not motivated by what motivates you to do good. Is like, oh, you feel really bad if you do bad things. At least most people, like who've retained their humanity. I think there certainly seems to be forces that are eating away at that conscience that we all have that keeps us from doing terrible things. Like I think you can't build that in an AI. So that's that's something we need to really be careful of by when we give away when we decide we want to trust AI to take care of complicated tasks that typically are for us humans to do. Like let's say driving, okay? Like there's kind of a push for the driverless car. Who's to say that AI like won't make a calculation? Let's say you're driving, and that maybe it's programmed not to save your life, but to save the most lives, like in a tricky situation. So the data is going to get you killed, but the greater good, the collectivist good, is in terms of the data is in terms of how it's programmed, like that will be maintained. Like it's like, okay, if I don't swerve out of the way into this tree, we're gonna kill 4 people. The driver will be killed. The driver will be alive, but four people are gonna get killed. So I'm programmed to save the most lives. So I'm not programmed to save my passenger. I just thought of that off the top of my head, but there is that aspect. Whereas like if you're driving, and driving is an interesting thing because your subconscious mind is actually, is it unconscious or subconscious? I'm not sure, but you often like you're on autopilot, and that's your subconscious taking over, and that's a moral, spiritual entity in depending on how you want to look at it. That thing will save your life, and that thing will gauge, let's say somebody's driving erratically, that thing is going to get out of the way. Like you can sense things probably that an AI will never be able to sense. Like is it, and yeah, they've got facial recognition. They're trying to put everything on, they're trying to digitize everything, but they're just those your sensory intuitive experience is just not something that they're going to be able to replicate unless we become less than we are, and by that I mean we would, like if all you did was watch TV, or you just took on mainstream corporate values, you become predictable and less than, like in a way, like I don't know if this is a great example, but like if you look at like social justice warrior values, there's sort of a logic to it, although like it gets tied into knots, but it's almost like you could get a computer to just sort of just to describe victims, and if you base your values on a victim mentality, like you could probably program an AI to have social justice warrior values. But that's not, that could be, you can see how that could just go awry really quickly. I'm kind of losing my train of thought with that. But it's just to say that we almost have the AI, the transhuman AI metaphor. We have very complex systems running reality anyway. Like you could look at the public school system. a human does not control this system anymore. It's, we have 100 years of theory and testing and, just to make, the system is so entrenched. It doesn't, a human can't change it anymore. And that's sort of what an AI would be like. Like even, many would argue, and I would also argue that it's a lost system. It's not a good system. Probably never was a good system regarding public school. So what you get with an AI is you get a collectivist, greater good calculation, and the individual gets squashed. This is why social justice warring is extremely problematic, why communism is not a good thing. It lends itself to AI, though, because you have these formulas to base morality on. And why? Yeah, I'll talk about morality later in the series. We'll save that for later. But that's just to say, even the complexity of your internal experience, it's not going to be replicated by AI. If you look at the mystical occult teachings, they're all very similar, like Freemasonry for one. You have as above, so below. You have, I think it's like as inside is as outside. I don't think that's how it's described, but that's the concept. Which means to say that as complex as the universe is, it's just as complex within your own mind. And when you have an AI or an AI-like systems sort of telling you what reality is, they're going to try to dumb you down and not. You're not going to get credit for your complexity and the depth and the ability you actually have, because it just won't compute. And that's what I'm saying. Consciousness will not compute unless you start computing with consciousness. And I'm not even sure what I totally mean by that, but I think there is if you can get into the intuitive, if you can really understand the intuitive nature of consciousness, you can make those predictions. You can have a grasp on the full spectrum of reality, even make predictions and whatnot. But the intuitive science, it's just, many wouldn't call it a science, but it's very real. It's real in your own self. And all this whole rant is really just to say we don't understand. Scientists do not understand consciousness. In your own mind how vast your inner world is. It's not understood. It can't be replicated unless we really dumb ourselves down. We just listen to what they say. They tell us about us. Even in, you kind of hide that intuitive voice that says, "Oh, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right." So it's certainly possible to become less than we are. You have books like 1984 sort of describing what that world would look like. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think I went a little long this time. It's certainly not my main interest right now either. I just wanted to kind of get some of my thoughts out there. Next week we'll go, well, it's not even next week. Next time we'll go into chapter 4. All right. Bye-bye.